Hey, welcome to Runaways podcast. My name is, and we are officially almost at Worlds. Like for almost everyone who's traveling, we will essentially be leaving this weekend. Some people are leaving a little bit after that, and then it'll be time to play in the Worlds that we've been prepping for all this time. I do not feel ready. It came up pretty quick. But we were literally just doing practice before we got on to do this. We're like, okay, we actually have to stop grinding some games so we can do the podcast. But Lucas, how has your week overall been? How is your prep for Worlds? How are you feeling for Worlds?
I'm feeling really good about CC. I feel like I have a good handle on the format, and I feel like I kind of know where all the decks are at, and the choice that I'm going to make is good based off of those. I feel slightly underprepared for draft, but I feel really good about it. I'm in that weird spot where like I feel really good, but I'm scared because I feel like I shouldn't feel this good with how many reps I have. So I'll do some more of that, and hopefully I keep with the same good attitude. But I feel really good. I feel like I'm going to win the event. Feels like it's going to be pretty standard stock at this point for me. Just show up, it'll be my day, and there will be a trophy at the end. So I'm feeling good. My week in Flesh and Blood, I did make it out to a ProQuest. It was actually at my local game store, the store that I work at. I ended up going. I was playing Zen. I went 4-1 in Swiss again, and then once again I made it to the finals, and then we split the finals. So exact same result as the other ProQuest I played in. Felt pretty good, same record and everything. Yeah, it was just a pretty good week. Got some work done, which was nice. And then basically at this point, I'm just trying to focus on getting all my schoolwork out of the way so that I don't have to worry about it in the last few days here and then when I actually travel. So that's what my focus is on right now. But I feel really good about the event.
Great. Dan, how do you feel prep level for Worlds?
I feel okay. No, I feel like perfectly ready for constructed. I don't think DO releasing shook things up too much. Like we're at least able to prep for that enough. No, I feel good about my deck options. Unsurprisingly, I'm like 96% to play an aggro deck at Worlds. Unless something crazy happens this week. But no, I feel good. I think I understand the meta well. I understand like how the decks in the meta are currently being played and strategies to counter those strategies and whatnot. So I feel great on that side. On draft, I am probably like horribly unprepared. I think I've said it every week, but I just don't have any draft events to go to. So
Oh yeah, me neither. I haven't done a paper draft yet
yeah,
since Tampa,
I really don't
and I'm
like
not
that.
gonna.
So I feel okay. Format's very deep, as we've been saying. I don't know. I have work to do, is what I'd say. I think I can get prepared enough. Like I've studied this format quite a bit. I've played a little less than usual online. I played way less than usual in person. So it's going to come down to, I think, doing the right analysis and kind of problem solving the day of and getting creative. But I feel okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm the opposite. Like I'm bringing 2 decks with me for Worlds. And we'll see which one I decided to play. So I have a lot of work I feel like I have to do in CC personally to play at the level that I expect myself to play at. Draft is weird because I am really confident in drafting the set, like sitting down and drafting my seat or finding what's open and then building a deck from it now. The variance in the games has been eating at me a little bit. Just how order of things draw or how certain matchups are just like top 10 of your deck, and what order things come in. So it's not like I'm not 3-0ing every draft, but I'm like, I go back, review my draft and go, I'm very happy with how I drafted this. And I can do that for multiple heroes. And I feel really good about that. So that's the part that I'm like super comfortable with is the draft side. The CC side, I feel like I need to do work to get to the level I want to be at, but we'll see. There's actually, plenty of time before we leave for the trip to just grind games. Grinding games is easy. There's like sit down grind games.
Yeah, and CC we can play in person in Japan, like
Yep.
all the time. We're gonna be together for a week before the event, so that's easy.
Yeah, it's going to be explore Japan, come back at night,
Yeah,
play
play
some
a game or
games.
two.
Yeah. Might actually be worth me bringing more than that, like a couple of decks just to have some cycle between for matchups. So
Yep.
I think that's probably what I plan on doing. But other than that, we had a pretty exciting week as far as ProQuest go because we had a new hero come out essentially, and that was Dio. Dio did make a big splash in our local ones that I went to anyway, but we could see that it did get plenty of wins. So if we're looking at week 3 wins, Aurora was actually number 1 this week at 20, which is interesting to me. Overtook Enigma, or
Although
Rollingston
it,
Enigma.
yeah, was it the same amount of events? Because that's also fewer wins than Enigma and
Yeah, they got
Aurora had for
shared.
the
They got
first
shared
weeks.
down, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so Aurora won 20 events. Enigma won 17. Florian, another bump up. That deck's been climbing every single week. It is now at 14 wins this last week. Viserai at 11. New at 11, which is about where they've been at, I think, every single week, 10 or 11. Dash.io just shows up now, gets 10 of those wins. That's where that kind of 8 from Enigma and Aurora combined. And then Azalea also got 10. Kano at 6, so a little uptick there. Prism at 5. I think Prism coming out to try and beat up the aggro decks. Is then at 4 again, same as last week. And then KO and everything else below that. To note, Acilio got 2 wins again. So there are Acilio players out there winning. I did see some pretty interesting lists when I was looking around online for Acilio. I was like, it's way too late to think about Acilio. But what do we think? Any surprises on here? Dio getting 10 wins, is that about what you would expect, or?
It was actually funny. I was listening to Arsenal Pass this morning, which I haven't done in a while. But Punkage is one of my favorite people to talk to and to hang out with in Flesh and Blood, so I figured I'd give it a listen. And he got asked the question, "How many wins do you think Dio's gonna get this week?" And he was like, "I think like 10." So I just want to give him a shout out for being right. But I mean, that's I think around what I would expect, right? 10 is pretty impressive for a deck that just kind of came out. People aren't really going to be super practiced with it yet. People might not have the best lists yet. They might not, know exactly how they're supposed to do everything, and some people might just not be able to get the cards. So for a pretty strong deck with probably a lower representation, that's probably around where I would guess it would land. The biggest surprise for me was honestly Aurora kind of continuing to be as high as she was. I'm personally not sold that deck is as strong as the numbers may indicate from the first 3 weeks, but it has been consistent and hasn't really had an off week. It's just been, 1-2 with Enigma every week, and being above Enigma 2 of the 3 weeks is pretty impressive, and I think speaks to the deck's power.
Yeah, Dan, anything pop out on that list, or anything you think is
Yeah, I'm
interesting?
trying to think. I agree on Dio. I think the deck's just kind of hard to play. Like, you really have to manage your resources properly, and if you don't, you run out of them like immediately. Like literally, your deck's is gone. So I imagine that's why it's low. I expect it to bump a little bit next week. Maybe like 5 or more wins. I don't know. What surprised me? I mean, the Florians, right? Like, I'm very curious to see what the decks look like. It feels like the type of deck that it's a value deck, right? Like something like Hachidori comes to mind, where it's just like you have good numbers per turn cycle, but you're kind of capped at like how high that value goes. Um, so I feel like if you're just doing that every turn at a ProQuest level, maybe you're just like outscaling enough people, and then it's probably like a big game plan difference is like how you're winning your games. I'd imagine, like just knowing like the Enigma matchup better than they know it from that side, and like
Yeah.
new and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I put a lot of work into Florian. This cycle, I was spoiler alert. I'm not playing Florian at Worlds, but I was really close to. And that statement, there is a universe where I like last minute pivot, although I
I'm
think it's
pretty sure
incredibly
in the
unlikely.
Discord it says that you locked on Florian at one point. I'm
Yep.
pretty sure
No, at one point I said I'm locked on Florian or insert other hero name here. I'm gonna make a decision later. But I really like Florian. He's like super adaptable, which is really nice. At the Pro Quest level, people get to know their metas better. And Florian's a deck where like if you want him to build him to just like crush Enigma, it's actually pretty easy if you just like put infinite deck slots in your deck for it. And the same can be true for a lot of these other matchups. And then he's just like really solid. Like he's pretty great into Aurora. And then a lot of these other like random decks, he's just like he's very good. He's adaptable. He has a bunch of good matchups, and he really doesn't have any matchups where he's just like doesn't have a plan that works. He has something. Sometimes deck building constraints make it difficult to win all of the matchups, but he has game into everything, and he's just like really solid. He reminds me of kind of how Icelander felt a while ago, where like she's in this spot in the meta where she's not beating up on a whole lot, but she's just pretty good into everything. And there are some things that she's good enough into where it's just like if you're 65% into enough decks, you just have a really good deck. It's also a deck right now where you just don't have any auto losses, which is a big deal, I think, when you look at some of these other decks, because there are a few matchups for a lot of decks right now that are just like really tricky. Although one thing I like about this format is it feels like there's a lot less of that than there has been in the past. Most decks, I think, have mostly reasonable matchups, and then some are harder than others. Although obviously there are some exceptions.
Isn't that technically what happens when it's just like a handful of aggro decks? Like the format's just like 5
Yeah.
aggro decks, and then you're like, of course it has game and
Yeah.
everything.
But
Aggro mirrors are just games into each other, right? Like
it's nice though too, because like all the aggro mirrors right now are like pretty skill intensive in my opinion. Like there's a lot of game planning and matchup knowledge. It doesn't feel like it has in the past where it's either like one of the aggro decks is just faster and it doesn't matter, and it also doesn't feel like we have like, oh, I won the die roll and drew my power card first, so then the game was over.
Yeah.
Like the Viserai into like Aurora matchup or whatever. It's like if you go first and draw Mordred Tide, the game doesn't end. Like you're ahead. Like it's a good play, but you know you guys still have some more room to play. So I think that kind of speaks to health of the format as from a diversity standpoint, but also from a like actually like health of the game standpoint. I think this format is very high quality in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the book bannings really worked. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if we've ever had like 4 to 5 almost equally viable aggro decks before. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Well, and they're all like different too.
Yep.
Like they all play into all of the decks differently. Like it's even though they kind of fit into the aggro like realm. Like Viserai and Aurora are super different, right? Like Florian isn't an aggro deck, obviously, but as another Runeblade is like vastly different. Dio is just like a completely unique monster. Like you just have like a lot of different options.
I think if Dio is out of the meta, this meta is like A tier meta.
Yep.
I think the fact that Dio exists, while spoiler, I don't think Dio's like just crazy than everyone else, because
I think the deck is a meme at this point.
But the issue is the deck is so powerful that it forces every other deck to play a certain way into it, and no longer is allowed to play the game how their deck is designed to play. So obviously it's very powerful if it causes that type of reaction from everything. But like
it reminds me of like if Zen had Traverse like in his deck. Like you still do like the broken stuff, and you still have games that just like don't matter, but like instead of having it every game, like you just have a little bit more variance added in.
It just feels like if I would agree with you. I think this meta is really good. I agree. It's better than last meta for sure. Not I like heavy hitters meta better personally, but that's Hatchetory stuff. But I will say that this meta is really fun. I think if Dio was less powerful, or hadn't gotten the armory kit, I think that the meta was like really nice.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's also still good.
It's still good. It's still good.
Yeah,
it's just like that's like the blemish. That's the blemish. That's the deck. It doesn't.
Yeah, I see what Cody's saying.
With
like
everything
all the
else in the
matchups
meta
before felt like so skill intensive, and like you need to like really understand the game plan. Where Dio, there's 2 game plans. Either they force you to block the whole game, or they don't. Right?
Yep, that's it.
Like you can't choose to race them. It's not a thing the deck allows you to do.
You only get to race them if they tell you can race them.
Yeah, if they don't play boom grenades.
Yep.
Pretty much.
If they're like, I take setup turn, you're like, oh, I get to play my cards.
Yep.
Like
it's a good feeling.
So that's my only issue. It's just like one of these things is not like the other. One of these things is Dio. Like it's like
That's what I said
what
last
are you?
week.
They're just playing their own
It's
game
like
over
the
there.
it's the meme where everyone's joining hands, and then
Yeah.
the Teletubby comes in. Dio's the Teletubby.
But I will say, even with Dio, meta's pretty good. I overall pretty happy with the state of the meta, much more than I've been in the past. So like, hats off. The bans has been great. I think it's great that like Florian, this mid range deck, can do well. To be fair, this is a very pushed mid range, and the only reason it's being like not the most dominant is there's some decks that are pretty fast and have some counters to them. But by all metrics, Florian in like heavy hitters meta would be like a monster, right? Like
He'd it'd be
I
it'd
think
be
so.
interesting. It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I think Germinate would be too strong for heavy hitters.
Yep.
I think it would just move
but-
KO up even more.
Well, I think Florian would actually be pretty reasonable in KO. But I haven't played that matchup. I mean, it's a matchup that still exists, so I'm sure some people out there know.
Yeah. But no, I think it's interesting. It's weird how some of the other decks in the meta kind of feel not as powerful, but nothing should have changed. Like Azalea. Like Azalea's good. Azalea was really good. And Azalea's been great.
I mean, she's had like 10 wins like every week.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of wins.
She's good
for a deck that's just completely ignored.
For some reason, it doesn't feel as oppressive as it did
Mhm.
previously.
It's because people's equipment's got better. Like every class, every
So-
set, you just see more equipment.
It's that, but it's
And-
also like because the books are gone and like these like infinitely scaling cards, we're playing 3 blocks again. Like we're not just playing every 2 block because you have to deal 40 first or you're out of the game, right?
Well, I think also Azalea's like play into the aggro decks is different because like now the aggro decks do get some value out of block,
Mhm.
and they don't scale as well. So like Riddle, like the biggest strength of Riddle is like it's like your opponent scales and they look at their hand and they say, well, I took 87 damage and then I did nothing. But if you're like a deck that can do something after you take the 87, like Riddle looks a lot worse.
It's because you can play. It's like every aggro deck is more mid range than we've ever seen aggro decks be.
Mhm.
That includes all
Yeah.
of them, like Aurora, Viscerai, Zen. All of them are more mid range than they've ever been. So they're not just like
Dio being the exception.
Dio being the exception. Everything else is like it's not melt your face off aggro, and so like yeah, if you get riddled, as if you're playing like Aurora and you get riddled, you're like, I still have stuff I can do. Like I can still
Yeah,
play
you're
the
like,
game.
anyway, I'm gonna play a Lightning Valley and a Discharge and a
Yeah.
attack.
It's also
Or-
a very
or-
D-React heavy meta. Like as a result of Dio and like D-Reacts are great against Avara.
hmm
So yeah, I think LSS did a very good job with how the book bannings affected this meta we have right now. I think High Octane being banned after Worlds, if they could go ahead with that, would come a long way of bringing everything back into the same playing field.
Do you think it kind of kills Dio though?
Sure,
Yeah,
just
Dio-
kill the
Dio
deck.
is-
I'd rather
I'm
ban
fine.
Processor, but that's obviously not going to happen.
I actually think hitting either one of those cards just means that Dio's just like an unplayable deck and it's not close. But
No, she was winning without Processor.
I think I'm
We
not
have the
sold.
stats. She's got wins this season.
I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know. I think I also think it's less of a problem when like one deck's whole thing is, hey, I'm a super loose cannon. You kind of have to respect me. Versus when it's like you look at a format and you look at one table has a Zen with Art of War and Bonds, and then the next table has Prism, and then the next table has Kano killing somebody from 60 off of 3 cards. And it's like, oh, maybe this is a little much. Whereas now it's like, oh, the Kano can't combo through an Oasis Respite, and oh, the Prism's playing a real game, and oh, the Zen blocks. And it's just like, it feels like a lot easier. And it's, oh, okay, cool, there's the Dio player with all of the plans that people know how to deal with Dio. It feels like she locks you out of the game like less than the other decks. Like Zen was like, if you attack me, you're dead. If you don't, you're gonna die eventually. And then Prism and Kano are just, you can do literally any legal game action that your deck can come up with, and you are deterministically dead by 70, which is just like not interesting.
It's like it's obvious that this meta is less powerful than last meta, but it doesn't necessarily feel. It doesn't feel not powerful. Like you're still doing
Because
powerful
your value
things.
plays feel good now.
Yeah.
Like when you
Yeah.
bounce a Godano Flash with an electrostatic discharge, like that feels insane. 1 card 7.
Yeah.
It's a good
Or you
balance, though. That's what I was trying to point out. Is
Oh, I
that like
agree.
you feel
Yeah,
like you're doing
like
powerful things, but you're not just winning the game instantly on one turn anymore. But they were able to keep that feeling of, hey, I did a really powerful thing. Unlike heavy
I think
hitters,
the
where you never did a powerful thing, you just like did good numbers.
I think there's one
I think
exception,
Yeah,
and it's Warmongers.
yeah.
Like that's a one card win the game in a lot of spots in this meta.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think one like really good example though of like this kind of powering down without feeling powered down is like Felling of the Crown. Like that card's like just objectively ridiculous. Like that card is one of the best cards ever printed. It's like not close, but it's like you have to take your time. You kind of have to block to set it up. It's really hard to make it more than your whole turn, and you kind of like naturally give your opponent the ability to like deal with the value in whatever way they choose, right? Like they get to choose the card that goes on the bottom. You know, as the Felling player, it's harder to like chain together these plays to get because you can't have a card in hand. Like it feels like a lot better than things in the past, like Art of War, that are just like kind of oopsie daisy. I did it, and then you died.
you can also just block the felling. Like
Yeah,
that is a legal game action you could take. They're
yeah,
like felling of the crown. You're like, okay, here I block it. Show me that
yeah,
you have something else next round. Like,
yeah.
It's not like Oakenold where it has non-dominate.
yeah. It's not like disrupting you and forcing your health to go down. That's really when disruption's bad. Is like
Yeah,
going,
like Uzuri. Yeah, get her out of here.
you're gonna take damage
just LL
and
her
you're not
already.
gonna play the game.
Mm.
Like Azalea has a lot of that, but
Yeah.
a little bit more.
There's a lot more counterplay because people's armor's better and people play D-Reacts. Like you can block some of Azalea's stuff. It's just
And people have
not all.
E-strikes. Like,
Yep.
Everyone has E-Strike. Look at the price.
yeah. True. Overall, very happy with the meta. With that said, let's talk about kind of some of our expectations for Worlds. I expect this episode to be a little bit shorter for everyone listening, just because we got a lot of practice to do for Worlds. Like we were literally at practice, went late. We're recording later than we normally do, and we're gonna go practice again after we record because it's just like, we got to get these stuff done. But let's talk a little bit. Honestly, what do you think is going to be the most played deck at Worlds?
Enigma.
Yeah.
There's too many viable aggro decks, right? They're going to eat up. Like aggro deck will be the most played deck, but
Yes,
for one hero, it's for sure Enigma, I think.
No. Yeah, I don't think it's close.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think you could say that like maybe like aggro Runeblade will be the most played deck as like even more specific. That's like closer between like Viscera and Aurora, but like those people are still going to be split, and those decks are very different, so they have very different matchup spreads. So
yeah,
I think it'll be Enigma.
I agree. I think if you combined Viscera and Aurora, it would be more than Enigma, but Enigma should.
They don't even feel like this. Like they decks are good into them in different ways, right? Like some decks are really good into one and really bad at the other. Right?
I do think
Also-
it's going to look like the pie chart from this week, like pretty close.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be like more Dio probably and less Azalea and
Yeah, less of the stuff at the end.
yeah, but it'll be
Definitely,
like
yeah, I definitely agree. Probably Enigma most play deck. It also makes sense because, like, I don't know, professional players or however you want to classify people who go to Worlds. I don't know what you want to say. People who go to Worlds. There we go.
some of us are professional.
That's the classical. So the people who go to Worlds, they just like playing Enigma. Like it's the type of deck that a lot of players like to play. I mean, if we even look at like Amsterdam, just as many people played Enigma that played Prism.
Yeah.
And Enigma was unplayable in that meta. Like there were the same amount was played though. So in the meta where she's actually good, there has to be more.
Yeah, it's like deck that allows you to flex skill in matchups, but also just like wins you some number of rounds just by playing the hero. It's like the ultimate like tournament deck.
It has win the game draws as well.
Yeah, and it's really valuable in a tournament to have like some number of rounds that you just like win. Like because you sat down and you're playing Enigma and your opponent's playing like Uzuri or whatever it is, right? Like
yep.
And then you also have the ability to like play some grindier games and flex the prep that you have over your opponent, which is also a draw for a lot of people.
Yep, I agree. That would be one of the main reasons I would see Enigma being number one. What do you think is the number two play deck?
I don't know. Like, I really thought Aurora's numbers would have gone down this week.
I think
someone can tell me how you're.
I 100% think Aurora.
Like, I have that deck ready to go.
Yeah, I feel like
I said I 100% think Aurora is the second most played deck at Worlds.
Yeah,
It's
like I
so it's so
think
it's like it keeps winning and it keeps
yeah.
being there, and I'm like, I keep expecting it to just go down and nobody to play it, and then people keep playing it and keep
And they
winning.
really
So
like it. Like people
yeah,
really like Aurora.
When I like
Uh,
hear from the people, I don't even know who, but like my feeling is that Viscerai is like more favorite at the moment. But yeah, based on the numbers, I think Aurora is just gonna be the most played aggro deck, which I think makes sense. Like it's we've talked about it a few episodes ago, but I think Aurora is just like a little enough more consistent than Viscerai. Where Viscerai's ceiling is a lot higher. So I can definitely see the appeal of Aurora, and she's got some.
yeah. Viscerai also gets like hated out a little bit easier. Like
Mhm.
Warmongers being a big part of the meta
Yep, your
is
Warmonger's proof.
a big deal. Yeah, you're instead of being a deck that can play Warmongers, you're a deck that gets hosed by Warmongers.
Yep, I think you're also
And
harder to
then
fatigue as Aurora.
yeah, and then you also are like worse against like a race face, which is a card that some people are talking about being more popular.
Mhm.
I also think Viscerai just generally has more ability for a lot of decks to like play into it. He's kind of like Dio, I think, where like you can add tools to your deck to just like keep making your Viscerai matchup better in a lot of decks, which makes it trickier. But he is more powerful, I would say, than Aurora. I mean, he does 30 sometimes, and Aurora technically can, but not really.
I also find Aurora decks, as you get more tuned and used to playing them, you get less bad hands, or at least less unfunctional hands, than you would get with like Viscerai. Because sometimes you just draw the bad side of your deck in Viscerai. And you're like, oh, I just don't do anything this turn.
Yeah.
Which I know for tournament players, they really hate that. Like they really hate the possibility of that happening.
Dude, they're just cowards.
They are. Part of playing in a tournament is being a coward. Like,
Dude, I'm never a coward. I just take my lumps. I move on.
So Enigma number 1, played deck. Number 2, Aurora. What's number 3? Is it Viscerai? Is it Dio?
Might be Florian.
Is it Florian? Because I
It might
really
be
think
new.
Florian's,
Like I don't know, man. New. I
I don't
see
think
new
it's
being third
new.
somehow.
I don't think new is third.
It's just like another one of those tournament decks, right? Like people like to play the deck that asks the most questions, right?
I think it's incredibly suspicious that new will be top 5 with pretty much everybody knowing that Enigma and Aurora are going to be like the 2 most popular decks. Like I'm not saying that nobody will take new, right? Like some people might make a meta call that like some of her good matchups will show up in Force.
Mhm.
But it's like if you look at the top of the meta as like Enigma and then Aurora and then a tier below that is like Viscerai and Dio and Florian, you're like good into one of those decks and like you play the game with 2 of them, and 2 of them you can heavily tech your deck to have game into. Like it's very I don't know.
I
I
honestly
feel
have
like
no clue after these two. There's 6 decks, and I don't know what order they fall in.
I don't even think I wouldn't put new. I would say it's between Florian Dio and Viscerai are like the next 3. And then I think like
I think
the
new,
next tier
I
is
think,
like new Azaleas and all that stuff.
yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
I think
Do you think
that
Victor shows up?
some, but not noticeably.
I'm not convinced that some will. Like he's not very good.
There will be victors there.
I'm just
I can
curious if
guarantee
people
it.
think Victor's good though.
I don't think so. I think people kind of have come to the realization that Victor's just like not a very good hero, because he just like every one of his good matchups is like no longer good when you lose clashes,
It's
and
really
then
just
every
the
one
first
of
one.
his
If you lose the first one, like
yeah,
you're
and
just
then
so
like every
behind.
yeah, and then like every one of your bad matchups is like only playable when you win all of the clashes, and it's just like what are we doing here? Like you just like can't play Victor and not leave a reasonable amount of your tournament up to fate that you like can't really control to a meaningful enough degree. It's just like it's too big of a swing to have like a full card or more of value contingent on something like a clash. Like it's just not
Agreed.
good.
To be fair though, this is the best time ever to be clashing. KO way down. Like your
Yeah.
and other guardians don't exist. Like you're like, oh,
Yep.
this is like the best time
Your
to ever
your
be clashing.
clashes are very consistent, but sometimes you whiff Like, no matter what Victor deck you're playing, you're probably playing Test of Strength and Trounce and Cast Homes and 2 to 3 other not cards that miss.
You gotta have balls of steel though. Just walking in the room when you know that Enigma's probably the most played deck and be like, I'm bringing Victor.
Yeah, well, and it's like, and then you like keep going down the line, and you're like, okay, Aurora, maybe that's fine. Then you're like, Viscerai, okay, you know, we have game, maybe we can build our deck to be
I
better.
don't
And you're
think
like
so.
Florian,
I think that's
you're
a
like,
problem.
yeah, you're like Florian. Okay, cool. This matchup's pretty close to unwinnable. Keep going. Oh, Dio. Okay, great. We have a good matchup. It's the most powerful deck, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it won like the 4th most pro quests. Oh, it does. It's probably not gonna have that high of an adoption rate. Oh, people realize how to beat fatigue. Otherwise, they're not gonna bring the deck. New. What's next? New. Oh, come on. Like,
I think
what
now
are
your
you
brother
doing?
is Kato.
Like how are you ever registering the horse
Yeah.
for this tournament?
No, I
Yeah.
agree.
Like, it's so disingenuous.
But it will
Like,
be
come on.
registered. People will do it.
Dude, it's just like get serious. Like, you're at Worlds. Like what are you doing?
What do you think about Prism as like a dark horse pick?
I haven't played any Prism since the bannings.
It's hard as the aggro decks. That matchup is hard as the aggro decks.
It's just like, surely there's better Sec Enigma decks out there, right? Like, I'd have to think so.
I mean, their matchup into Enigma's terrible. Any competent
Yeah.
Enigma just wins that matchup literally 100% of the time. I don't even think there is a percentage chance that you could ever win against a competent Enigma as Prism. Like, you could probably make your own draws.
It's
And
like
it's
Prism.
it's nearly that hard.
I think Prism just like wins any game where you pick your own draws.
It's pretty
even without
close.
tells.
You just like never hit, and if you hit, you just like they just fatigue you through angels, and then what are you doing? Like,
It's hard.
Yeah, it's very hard. But it is so good into the aggro decks. Like, the aggro decks just like cannot deal with this thing. Viscerai can do more because it has more poppers just naturally in the deck in most cases. But like, it is actually really hard as like Aurora, Zen, Dio, like all of these. Dio a little bit, but all of these matches are pretty hard.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have enough experience to speak on it too much, but I would just like just thinking about Prism, it's just, I don't know, it's just so suspicious.
Mhm.
Like, every deck that sacks Enigma is just like, I feel like you have to have like a really good justification. So like, if you're really sure that like all the aggro decks are going to be super played, and you feel good into all of them, and you feel like it's not too high variance, then maybe you're fine. Or maybe, you know, you've only played against bad Enigmas, or maybe you've discovered something about the matchup, and you know, you feel like that one's playable, which is good. You know, you're probably good into like New and Victor. Well, or sorry, Victor probably just actually dumpsters you, but there's probably not a whole lot of those. And I think the most interesting thing I would see is like, if anybody will bring like the disrespect Prism builds that just like don't care about poppers, and they're just like, nobody's playing popper decks, no 6 power, and just like try and figure it out that way. But I don't know. I think it's a suspicious call for sure.
I think the extra CC bound makes it hard to bring these like
Yeah,
decks that are bad against
yeah.
the best.
I
deck,
wonder
right?
if
Or the
people
most played deck,
realize
rather.
that though. I wonder if people realize.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
do
that's
also
actually
question
gonna,
that, but
yeah, I don't think people are gonna like actually make
I think
decisions.
it makes it
based
harder
off
to
it.
bring
Okay.
like
I think this point is actually really important. So just for like people who might not 100% know what we're getting at, in the past when you go to a major event, and we've alluded to this in past podcasts, that CC is not the most important part of the game. Like, CC almost doesn't matter. You can bring whatever you want as long as you can X2 with it, because draft is all that matters. You need the 5-1 or 6-0.
Yeah, eight rounds specifically.
But yeah,
You need a
there used to only
be.
be 8 rounds, and then it was pretty easy to just like, not easy, but it was easier to go like 3-1, 3-1, or you know, whatever in CC. And so you saw a lot of these rogue decks make it a lot further, because on day one you're just playing against everything. So the rogue deck could get any random matchup. For example, Worlds last year there was like a 4-0 Tech Lovasan. Like, that's not a real deck that's gonna like ever win the tournament, but like, there was only 4 rounds and it got a bye, I believe, in one round, and then like won the other 3, and it was like 4-0, and then no one ever heard of it ever again. But that's that's like an example of what can happen when you only have 4 rounds. So like CC wasn't nearly as important, but now you add that 5th round, your chances then on day 1 of having to face the most popular deck are now astronomically higher. And so like you have to be good into the top decks. Otherwise,
Well,
more of those fringe decks will get knocked out on day 1 because just by the variance of having an extra round.
well, also, it's not even just like playing against the best deck. It's kind of just, we see this a lot in the past at majors where like you'll get to the like middle of day 2, like CC is about to start, and you'll look at the top tables and it's like, oh my god, there's a Dawnblade Dory that's X1, and it's some guy who played against like 2 Fi day 1 of Swiss and then 6-0 draft, and it's like that doesn't mean that Dawnblade Dory is the best deck. But 5 rounds of CC day 1 and 9 rounds in total just probably means that the actual better decks are going to do better. Like it just skews the data a little bit more towards the decks that are actually good will do better because more of the percentage of the event is CC than it is draft than it has been in the past.
Yep. And I do wonder how many people are taking that into account with their deck choice, because I think that
I would say maybe 2.
oh, well, at least
Am I
3.
included? 'Cause I sure did.
We are. So
No, that's 2. It's not mine. I'm playing the same deck regardless if there's like 8 rounds on day 1.
sure. But I would say that it should make the tournament's results reflect expectations more often. Not all the time. You'll still have big breakout performances. But
Yeah, like
more
one
often.
extra eighth of the time.
Yeah. It might be a little higher than that.
Yeah, I don't know how statistics work.
Fair. But yeah, I think that, Dan, that was a good point. We should see more things shake out. And if someone's going to Worlds and listening to this and hasn't taken into consideration that you have to play 5 rounds of CC on day 1, you have to X3, excuse me, to make day 2. You should probably take that into account with your fringe deck that you're bringing.
Yeah.
Speaking of fringe decks, what do you think about Kano?
I think it's just bad. I don't think it's like unplayable. Like I know some people put it in D tier. I just think it's a normal bad deck, right? I mean, it's like Riptide, where like it has some matchups that are good, and you do some things well, but you're just not that good. It's like Vincent. Like you do the thing your deck's supposed to do. You do it sometimes. Some people are better into you than others, and you're just losing more games than you're winning against people of similar skill level playing the best decks.
Do you think it's been enough time that people will disregard Kano, and Kano then gets an edge because they sit down across from people who have no AB?
I don't think it's quite so. At the event, that will happen. There will be some Kano who sits across from somebody who decided that they were going to sack Wizard and they get creamed. That's going to happen at Worlds. But I don't know that it will like increase the number of people that play Kano or make it so that Kanos are actually going to do well at the event. Like I would still expect Kano to have a pretty poor conversion to day 2. If a Kano top 8'd, I would be very surprised. And I don't think that line of thinking is going to lead to more people playing Kano. Like all the Kano players aren't playing Kano. There's a reason. It's because it's just bad.
I think it's trending that way, though. I think
It's
like
trending
every
that way.
day Kano gets better because he gets worse.
Yeah. It's a nice paradox to have from like a deck building. Like either your deck's just like broken or your deck sucks and everybody thinks it's broken. I think
what is happening is the non-Kano players or the Kano players stopped playing Kano, played other decks, and now they're like, I should go back to Kano. Like,
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if everyone goes back and they're just trying to take advantage of people sleeping on it.
Dude, nothing is harder than going from being like a Kano player to playing the actual game, like playing actual Flesh and Blood. Like that has to be incredibly difficult.
Lose.
Like, yeah.
Because you're like not playing
You've
FAB.
never learned how to play FAB.
Like
You've only learned how to play Kano. Like,
dude, it's like you. I come back to this tweet that I made a while ago where I was like, hey, there's gonna be Kano's like the best deck for X event, and there's gonna be none in the top 8, and then it's gonna top 8 the calling because the Kano players don't know how to draft. And then at that event, no Kano. There was like one Kano in top 8 of Pro Tour. Shout out to Felipe, he proved me wrong. But then like it did super well at the calling. Like Majin got second. And then you look at all the Kano players, you're like, how'd you do? They're like, I went 4-0 in CC, and then I 0-3 draft. I don't know what happened. It's like, shocker. Who would have thought?
I have to say, I'm a little worried about some Acilio spice coming out and doing some work.
I'm not. I think it's just like a high variance aggro deck.
Yeah.
It'll run you over if they good side of variance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very much playing against Acilio. They tell you only the top 15 cards, 20 cards of your deck matter. Like every time. It'll either be the easiest game you've ever played, or you could not play the game. I do wonder if maybe someone figures out a more mid-range value way to play Acilio that
Mid-range
ends up being
Acilio
better.
is my favorite archetype, and I've never played the hero.
So I'm just pointing out, it's just like very unexplored. There's always 2 Acilios that win, like every week. Maybe Acilio's 2 guys have figured it out.
With our sample size of 2 weeks,
yeah, like,
every week. Oh, has it been 2 every week?
Every single week. So can you just imagine? Like, it's just the same guys. They're just they're just the Acilio guys. I don't know. Dash IE looks to be actually live for Worlds.
Yeah.
The deck that no one's practiced against.
Baby. 998. One time for the one time.
Yeah, I'm still just gonna ignore that deck exists.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else spicy or interesting you think might show up at Worlds?
Riptide?
We haven't talked about it, but Ira is legal for the calling, which obviously doesn't matter for Worlds, but I actually think that deck is potentially really good. And so I would be interested to see how many people like actually put the work in to try and figure out that deck, because it's not a complicated deck to build. But like Erase Face, Weakest Link, CNC, these are all good cards right now, and they fit really nicely into her shell. Flick Flack is really good right now. She has the ability to lean slightly more aggressive, and she doesn't get punished by decks that just like give her a full hand as a like mid-range defensive deck, which is really powerful. So I would be looking at Ira at the calling to be kind of like a dark horse pick for this weekend. Although obviously, again, since it's not legal for Worlds, it might not matter a whole lot, and maybe nobody puts any time into her, and it just doesn't matter. But I think that deck is actually really potentially like very strong post Worlds, so I would look out for her. But whatever.
Potential.
How do you look out for her? Just like D-Reacts?
I don't know.
I
don't know. I think she's like so unreasonably flexible. Like that's like one of her best things is that like you can be super aggressive and you can be super defensive and you can be everywhere in the middle with her. So I really don't know.
Cool. Okay, let's get to podcast questions. These questions are asked by members of our premium Discord. If you'd like to be able to ask questions on the podcast, interact with people on the team, read tournament reports that we have going up, or find people to practice with, feel free to join in the link below. Millen asks, what class/talent would you like to see in the new set in World Premiere in Prague? Also, do we know anyone who's going to go?
I'm not going to go, but I think we're going back to Volcor. But I have no like evidence. It's just like it feels like Phi has been the most like hated hero by LSS. Like it's actually kind of ridiculous when you look back at it. Like Phi hasn't the only thing that's happened since I joined the team is like Belittle got banned. Or I guess that was like right before, but like Belittle got banned, and then like you look at expansion slots for every other hero and they like get stuff, and then Phi is like, well, there was a Draconic card that was only playable in Dromai. Then there was 8 Ash. Then there was the best ninja card printed in years that he just can't do anything with. And then they printed like 1 or 2 other bad ninja cards that he also can't play and like don't do anything in his deck. So like he's gotten like actually nothing since the implementation of the expansion slot.
He got rowdy.
Which feels like it feels like it's exactly designed for heroes like him. And then also we just gotten a lot of like hints recently at the new Dromai replacement coming out, and it feels like they probably want to do that sooner rather than later would be my guess. So we might not be going back to Volcor, but it would not surprise me if we got some announcement about one or both of those heroes soon, because like poor Phi.
I like the theory that we are doing Monarch 3 as the conclusion, and
It got confirmed that is not. James White said in the interview. It's
I
in
did not watch the
2025.
interview yet.
Yeah, he confirmed that would happen in 2025.
Well, isn't Prague isn't the new set in 2025?
I think it was 2026, Lucas, right?
Because 2025 is next year.
A year later.
Oh, okay.
Ethan said it wasn't the next set because of something that James said on the stream. That's
Okay.
all I remember.
So it could be, okay. I'll have to go see. But I like that theory that was where we're getting Dromai. So I guess we'll see what we're getting.
Okay.
I don't know what I want. What do you want, Dan? What do you want next set?
I just gotta jump on board Lucas. Like, I've been saying this my whole Flesh and Blood life. The disjustice to Phi is ridiculous.
It is actually like kind of ridiculous when you look at it
He
objectively.
won Worlds. What are you talking about? Best.
Every other hero in the game gets consistent support.
Yeah, they don't win Worlds.
They nerfed him out of the format and then just kept making him worse. And then
but then he won Worlds. He won the tournament.
If you say he won Worlds one more time, I'm just
letting you know why he doesn't get new cards. The Worlds winning deck doesn't get new cards.
Dromai does every set.
She didn't win Worlds.
Oh, Worlds, sure.
Yeah, the Worlds winning deck doesn't get new cards.
Icelander also got no new cards, I guess.
Wait,
no, Icelander got so many new.
Oh
wait, no, she didn't get any new. She got them in the first strike deck.
Yep.
No, there's no wizard cards in there. Oh.
Yep, you win Worlds.
Anyway, I would like more Draconic cards to play with as well. And
yeah, Draconic cards are sweet. Like it's actually like such a cool talent, and it just like feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Make my Blood of Drakais worth money, please.
Yeah.
Well, I still want Monarch 3. That's
Shadow Blade is my second choice.
If I can have anything I want, that's what I want. Okay. Next question from Kraft. Maybe there's something that's been asked a lot, but what was the step that you took to get over your previous skill barrier? I think that's a good question.
Yeah, I figured it. I like to read the questions early so that I have an answer ready, and this was a really hard one. It took me a while to kind of think about it. I would say I think my biggest like transition and level up was kind of like a smaller thing, but it was kind of just how I looked at the game. I think the biggest thing that I would say that is underrated, this might not be the actual biggest level up, like in terms of skill gained, but I think something that people don't really talk about is looking at the math and understanding the math of plays that you make. Like this is probably the highest value line. This is probably a lower value line. And then understanding not only when to deviate, but when you are deviating from that play. I think just when you don't have that skill set and when you don't understand the math fully and you don't fully understand why you're supposed to deviate from the math, you get a lot of spots where people will make plays that they kind of get yelled at for. I don't really have a better way of like articulating that quickly, but basically like plays where like somebody says, "Why did you do that?" And you said, "I just kind of felt like it." Or like, "I don't know. It just felt like what I was supposed to do." Like I feel like I'm supposed to block more here. And it's okay to use feeling for some things, but I think it's important to like have a reason for deviating outside of the value play. And that kind of, you can't really do that without knowing what the best value play is with every hand. And obviously sometimes it's hard to discern value because a lot of it is implied value. But once you get a general handle on kind of similar value propositions, understanding when to deviate from the one that is just higher is important. Like a lot of that will come with game planning. Or with strategizing and sideboarding. And that's an important level up in and of itself. But I would say just in general, knowing when you are supposed to deviate from just the normal right play is how you kind of level up from just a good player to somebody who can make the tournament winning decisions and who can make the tournament winning plays at the right time.
I have lots of thoughts. Yeah, so leveling up is a constant thing, right? Like, there's always a new level up, depending on where you're at with your game. Sometimes your level up is an old level up that you like undid, if that makes any sense. Like just this weekend, I had a level up between Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday, after I was driving home at like midnight from yet another finals loss, of course. I had the revelation that I forgot about a level up I had before like the last Pro Tour, which is I tend to think too much. Which it's important to like think through all of your lines and make sure you're not missing anything. But the issue is if you do that excessively, your drags on, you're like draining your mental energy and your physical energy a bit. And by the end of the day, now you just can't think at all. And that's what happens to me. Um, so it's really, I guess that level is about self-reflecting and like um, looking for those types of things you can do differently. But so then Sunday, I did the no thinking approach and I played like a loose cannon and it was quite good. But that's one thing. I think the biggest, most important level up is just like being willing to be wrong and to like learn from other people. Um, because that enables you to like see the game differently from other
That's
perspectives.
a
And
that's a really big deal,
yeah,
actually. I don't think that gets talked about enough. Is like not only the ability to like listen to other people, but to like understand that you can extract value and information from so many things in terms of getting better. Like you don't like you the person you're talking to doesn't have to be better than you for you to gain
mhm.
things from them, and like you don't have to be losing to gain things from games. I've been talking to my local about this recently, who will ask me like how good do you think I am, and like what do you think I still need to work on. And that was something I talked about, is like it's really important to be able to gain value and like recognize where you can get better, from things that you might not otherwise think you can. And just like being willing to listen to people or to just any source of information, I think is really important. And being like obviously like humble enough, right, to like realize that that might be useful to you. That's been a big level up for me recently, actually, because I don't know if you guys, viewers and people who might know me might know this, but I'm a reasonably confident individual, especially when it comes to flesh and blood. I'm definitely a cocky little shit sometimes. um, but like recognizing that there are things that everybody can give you that are worth value and that you can use to your own benefit is really important, and I think it's overlooked constantly.
Yeah, I think my last. Well, first of all, for all I know, I'm getting worse at the game, so that's always a possibility. Uh, um, it's kind of a joke, but not really. I have been gaining a lot of skills with a lot of different decks. I feel like I can play a lot of decks at a very competent level. My previous skill barrier was not listening to Lucas. That was the best. The best thing that I learned was that you don't take his recommendations for decks when you go to tournaments, because you just waste 2 weeks testing a deck that doesn't do what he says it does. And then we got way better after that. We everyone on the team has learned this lesson. So that was my last one. In a more serious note, I think it's been more of kind of some basics. The game changes quite often, which is why I think when you talk to some players who've been playing for a very long time, they might not know how they've gotten better or where they're currently at skill wise, or if they've gotten worse, or any of these questions that you ask them. And you'll quite often hear. But that's because the game we're playing quite often changes around every ban list and set. Sometimes it doesn't, and it's the same game. But lately, it has been dramatically changing. For instance, Heavy Hitters is a whole different game than what we're playing right now. And it was a different skill set and a different way to play the game. And then Miss Veil was a completely different game than what we're playing right now. And then like post Miss Veil was a different game, and now Rosetta is a different game. They're like there was like with all the bans and everything. This is a very different game than we were playing before the bans. And so like some of these things translate, but like you just have to be better at certain areas of the game depending on what's going on, and that's like the stuff that you should really be focusing on. Like this is a very technical play type of
Technical, and I also think
and
game plans
game
have
plan.
never
Yes.
mattered more in Flesh and Blood. It's like every deck that I play, it like I'll play 3 games of a matchup and I'm like, this is just stone cold unwinnable, and then I just try something else and it's like, oh, this is fine.
Yeah, that's honestly
And
the
it's just like,
biggest. I like
yeah,
the highest impact, fastest level up is like have game plans
yeah.
and like prove out your game plans. Like the difference between playing a tournament with and without game plans is not close. Like
Yeah, it just makes everything easier. Like when you know what you're trying to do.
Yep. Craft also asks, additionally, what hero is one card away from getting a major power boost?
I think this question's worded a little bit Strangely, I think probably what it should be is like what hero could gain the most from like a single card, because like there's a lot of heroes, like every hero is like one really far, like really ridiculous card away from like just being really good. um I think Prism is like the deck that came to mind for me as like, this deck is broken and powerful, and if it gets a card that solves like any one of its issues, it's just like such a huge deal, because her ability to like search your deck and to draw cards means that like any small piece that you get, whether it's a figment or a new herald or a new instant, just like can completely fix a game plan and just make a matchup like completely flip on its head.
I'll tell you what deck it's not. Bolton, because they keep giving him that
I
one
was gonna say
card
Levi also for
to
the
make
same
him
reason.
good, and it's
Riptide
never
as
good
well.
enough. Like
No.
I love it every time Bolton gets a new card. Like, dude, this card is crazy. It's Bolton time, baby. And it's never Bolton time.
It's never Bolton
never
time.
Bolton time when you go -1 card in your hand in order to play the game. It's just never. That's never what time it is.
No, I think the real answer has to be Kano. Like if that deck gets another blue zap, the
I
meta's
think this. I think I think the spirit of the question is what deck is almost good enough to be good and just needs a little push.
I think it's like, it depends on like the tier flip,
Yeah.
because like Vincent is like a card away, a card or
a
two,
hero
like
ability away in my
No, he's a
opinion.
hero. We thought that too, and then she got all of these great cards, and she's still
Unless the
trash.
card makes a soul shackle.
Yes, if the card
then
made
we're in
one soul shackle, she is a good deck.
I actually think if Vincent had a way to go above rate and banish a card from your hand, like if they had like Art of War go again every time, or like a similar effect, she'd be really good. I think the fact that she can only double Rune Gate every other turn, or single Rune Gate one turn, or get lucky with a Shadow Puppetry or a Widespread Ruin is like actually a big problem. But if she had like zero cost go again, like banish a card from your hand, like draw a card, make a 2 rune chance or whatever. Obviously, that would be like pretty ridiculous. But something like that just lets her do that. I think that would be
Even
like
if
a
it was just
really
a
big deal.
0/4 that said banish a card from your hand, this gets go again. Like that would
Yeah.
just be good enough that she can at least push and do something.
It needs to be equipment.
Probably.
She needs like a book that does that.
But no, she just needs a card that creates one soul shackle. Just that's what it does. It just makes a soul shackle.
Oh, alternatively, a way to use eloquence tokens that is also playable. That's not just read the runes. Like if like eloquence tokens are like so close to being like makeable enough that they're good, but like you don't have anything to use them on, and if you like, the only things you can use them on are so bad when you don't have an eloquence token. So if she could get like one more good non-attack that's like playable with or without an eloquence, maybe.
Yeah. Tough. It's tough when your hero ability sucks.
Yeah.
Right, Bolton?
Oh, Dash IO is one card away from being the best deck in the game, and it's not even like remotely close.
Yeah. But it's already kind of good. Okay. Renzo asks, what will win Worlds? Player and hero.
So, you guys want to guess what my answer is for player?
I think I have a similar answer.
I think I have a similar answer as well. I'm going to say this. We can't really say what hero it is because we all expect ourselves to win Worlds for the most part. Because that's why we go to Worlds, is because we think we're going to win.
Yeah, here
I can't like tell you what hero I'm playing. So
I'd like to adapt the question.
Yeah,
I think that the player that is going to win Worlds will be the member of TCG Runaways that plays the same deck as me and does the best. That's who's going to win Worlds.
No, I think like who's going to win? It's going to be like a Phi or Kano or something that just like somehow miraculously does the thing.
No, the best one would be Dash IE. Dude, if Dash IE, that would be the best.
Okay, who's the best Dash IE player in the world? Well, they're gonna do it,
bro. Who cares?
that would be so.
They're hopefully they're not playing Dash IE for their own sake.
If we don't win Worlds, I want Dash IE to win Worlds.
Yeah, I will say if we're not allowed to choose a runaway, then I would say probably Pablo Pintor on Enigma, simply because he is so good at Flesh and Blood, and that is a good hero that I think it is very possible that he plays. It's a boring answer, but
Also asks
Reasonable.
what will be the most represented hero in Osaka, and we already talked about that. I'll
We
do
already,
Enigma.
yeah.
And what hero can be a big surprise? We already talked about those as well. Fighting Walloon asks, you're sitting down to play an aggro mirror. You lose the die roll. What can you do in sideboarding or game plan to overcome the disadvantage of losing a die roll creates?
I have a really good answer. The first answer is play in this format instead of in other formats.
Yep. Good one.
Because one big thing is all of the decks, all the aggro decks right now are really good at gaining advantage and doing stuff when you go first, which is a really big deal. And the die roll just doesn't feel like it matters that much.
Yeah, I don't even know what
And
side they're
I
saying
actually
is
don't
the
think the die roll
disadvantage.
has. Yeah, I actually don't think it's ever been that big of a deal, but
It's been that big of a deal. Are you playing Shade Mirrors?
Yeah, it's fine.
I will also say, well, run Truce. I don't know. Put Truce in your sideboard.
Yeah, I mean,
go first.
Cards
Run
that are
Truce.
good going first is like a pretty easy, like obvious answer, right? Like this rounds on me and Ninja Mirrors historically has been like something that people play for that. Truce is an example. I'm not sure that the aggro decks right now want Truce, but that is something you can do.
You can do that.
Is just make your deck better going first.
Cards that
Another,
also.
yeah, a big thing that you get when you go first is that you get to play the first 5-card hand, and you have the ability to choose how you want to filter your hand. So if you are playing a deck that can scale, playing a game plan that is more focused on having a few really powerful turns can be a really way to go first. Well, if you're playing if your win con is I'm going to have 220 damage turns and that's going to win me the game, then going first looks a lot more appealing potentially. Whereas if your plan is just I'm going to do as much as I can as soon as I see my cards and just try to kill them before they can do anything, a lot of the times going second is going to be better suited for that because you get to present some damage first.
With the exception of like sometimes Viscerai and sometimes, well, and definitely Dio, but sometimes Viscerai, most of these aggro mirrors, you could just block, man. Like their hands don't outscale their hands. Viscerai does sometimes. He can super scale outside and he kind of has that old reminiscent. But for the most part, these aggro decks don't scale their hands. So like if you go first and you set a card, or maybe you swing at them because they can't block. Who knows? Or maybe they get greedy and they play like their channel. You're like pass, and they're like, I'm going to play my channel, and you're like, I'm going to punch you in the mouth. Like these are all things that you can do. But you set a card, you go, and they're like, if they come in hot, you're just like, you have 2 cards. Like you can do that now. You couldn't do that in the past. Like this is an acceptable play. So feel free to do that. You get to block with 2 cards and then swing 3. You're at an advantage. Like. Let's go.
Some decks also like you play Tunic going first, you play like your 3 block armor going second, that kind of thing. Because like behind half a counter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's less relevant now because I don't think the matches are fast enough. But definitely in the past, that has been a big consideration.
Or like even Blossom Spring going second. Like that's usually what it was. Like if the one resource. It was like the Fimir back when Stubbies wasn't banned. It's like you go first, you play Tunic, you go second, you play Blossoms because you need the resource.
To be fair, it might have been wrong to play Tunic at all, and you would probably weren't supposed to.
I think we got there eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just always Blossom in the mirror, but yes. Cool. Well, thanks for listening. I don't know if we're going to be doing one next week. There is a small chance we might record a random podcast and drop it while we're in Japan, but I'm making literally no promises because I have no idea how we're going to feel or what's going to be going on when we're there. So either talk to you next week, but if you're going to be at Worlds, come out, say hi, chat with anyone on the team. We'd love to hear from you, see you, and talk to you. But we really need to go practice before it gets so late that Dan falls asleep at his keyboard. So goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, we're getting rid of the envelope here, but
What we could do here is go ahead and play the envelope.
All 3 pitches of envelope and darkness.